Hi guys, welcome back to Forgetful Scholar, and this week we're gonna chat about one book again. Also, happy spooky season! So this week we're going to talk about Frankenstein, or the modern day Prometheus, and it was published in 1818, but it was written in 1817, right? It's 301 pages about. It's separated in 3 parts. Now this is the book I got. It was on Barnes & Noble's like sale for like $10, and I was like, oh, absolutely. So I love the illustration. I love the silver kind of has an electric effect, and it's textured with sort of snakeskin-esque cloth, and it has stenciled edges. Honestly, and it's very square. It's the most square book I have, and I kind of love that for this book, you know? It just fits. So of course this book was written by Mary Shelley, who is an interesting person all on her own. And I mentioned before how I was a little hesitant to read this book because I really enjoyed it in college, high school. And I knew that like a lot of the themes centered around grief, and this was before grief happened to touch my life, as it were. And grief is an interesting thing. It doesn't really go away, you know. It just sort of fades, becomes a part of you, becomes a little tiny mosaic tile in who you are, and you know, the hollowness becomes sweet remembrance after a while. So it does, like, if you're in that space right now, I'm so sorry. It is so hard to lose a loved one, but it'll be okay, you know. It'll be okay. Eventually thinking about them won't hurt. It'll be nostalgic, you know. It'll be all right. I promise it'll be okay. So Mary Shelley, but what I wasn't prepared for, because I didn't remember this the first time I read this, was just the loneliness. Like, it was pouring out of this book. But okay, let me start off how I wanted to start. Sometimes I'm all over the place. So I mean, it's a masterpiece, right? 5 stars, masterpiece. And I would encourage to read it, but this was written in 1817, okay? This was written in the 19th century. This is early 1800s, okay? The pacing that you're used to, no. It does not exist, okay? So please go into it like that, and understanding that it was published in a penny dreadful, I believe. So it was published in 3 different parts. So the pacing, the sentence, like the story structure you're used to, forget it, okay? Forget it, all right? And I know, talking to some people who read it after watching the different mediums of Frankenstein and everything, they were surprised that the monster is more of a jaundiced yellow than a green, okay, in this book, all right? So, and for simplicity, I scratched myself. Simplicity purposes, I'm going to refer to Victor Frankenstein as Victor, and Frankenstein's monster as the monster. It's just gonna make it easier for me, and I'm all about that. So I always love this part, right? Because in the movies, bringing the monster to life is like this big over the top dramatic scene with the lightning and everything, and like I always found it so funny because in the book it's like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. I mean, Victor getting up to the point where he could create the monster takes like years with experimentation, and you know, talks about dissecting cadavers and torturing animals. Where the animal torture comes in to make the creature, I don't know, but it's just one line in there and a throwaway line, but like, anyway. But yeah, creating the creature really is like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. And he thinks he's failed, so he goes to his because his laboratory is right next to his apartment. He goes to sulk, and the monster pulls off the curtain, and Victor runs into the night, meets up with his best friend. When they get back to the apartment, he looks around, monster's gone. He's like, okay, cool. And spends the next 2 years just living up with his friend. I know. He released the monster into the world and was like, oh well, la la la. So that portion always makes me laugh, considering everything, you know? I will say the movie media, like the visual media of Frankenstein, I can't, like, which one's your favorite? Because, like, I have a hard time deciding between, like, Young Frankenstein, which is always a fun watch, or I remember the black and white reruns on TV Land, I think, like 2 o'clock in the morning, of the Munsters and Harry Munster. Harry Munster is, like, what I picture every time someone mentions Frankenstein's monster. It just is. It just is. So I'm curious to see, like, what, you know, what your favorite, like, Frankenstein monster is, but Harry Munster is probably my favorite. Man. So for a quick synopsis, and I hesitate to say spoiler alert, but quick synopsis. This story is being told to us in a letter from a random ship captain named Walton. Walton? Yes, Robert Walton, to his sister, Margaret. And he's being told the story from Victor, who he pulled out of the ice, like half frozen. So, unreliable narrator, yes. And also, going into this is the old adage of treat a person like a monster and they'll become the monster, but you have to understand she's the first one that did it. You know what I mean? Like, when people read Agatha Christie, they're like, well, I knew that that shocking twist was a shocking twist. It happens all the time. It's like in mysteries, it's like, yeah, but Agatha Christie was the first one to do those twists, you know? So this is like the blueprint, if that makes sense. And am I excited about the movie? Yes. Yes, I am. Do I want a faithful adaptation? Yeah, I want to see what that looks like. Do I think every single scene and beat in this book needs to be in the movie? Heck no. Like, in the book, we get a lot of, we're introduced, like, Walton to his letters to his sister, and it's a lot of, like, everyday stuff for him that we don't need to know. Then there's letters from back home to Victor about, like, random town gossip we don't need to know. There's a lot of stuff that wouldn't work in movie form. It just wouldn't. But it will, but like the new movie coming out with Isaac, with him, I'm very excited about, because it looks like, when I saw him getting pulled out half frozen and the monster being yellowish, I was like, ooh, I think it's gonna be pretty faithful. I wonder what's gonna happen. I mean, I know what happens, but you know what I mean. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's not like I hated the other adaptations either, even the older black and white movies, because I get why they did that in the short amount of time. It's still kind of faithful to the spirit of the book, what Mary Shelley was trying to say, so it's fine. It's not like, and I'm gonna go on a side tangent, hold on, it's not like Wuthering Heights adaptations where they stop the movie pretty much when Catherine dies, and they never explore how Heathcliff is a horrible person like the book does. So people think like Heathcliff is this romantic hero. He's not. He's not. He continues to abuse his wife horribly, and yeah, he's married, and he continues to abuse his children and Catherine's children horribly, and then he desecrates her grave. So like, he's not meant to be a romantic hero. So that's why the Wuthering Heights adaptations always annoy me, because they don't really stay to what Emily Bronte was trying to say, you know? So the Frankenstein adaptations, I always get a kick out of, because they're pretty much in the vein, right? Now, Walton pulls Victor out of the ice, and Victor's like, let me tell you my story. And then he proceeds to diatribe this whole tale. And yes, I meant it when I said that he was just like, oh, the monster isn't here, la la la, 2 years of fun with my best friend in school, and then I'll deal with it later. Like, and this book does deal with grief. Like, when Victor goes to school, it's just after his mother dies, and that's horrible. He goes to school and he gets obsessed with his studies, and he is belittled and mocked in academia, so he doubles down even more, and he steals grave robs bodies to test on cadavers and stuff like that. And that's horrible and ghoulish. It was horrible and ghoulish at the time, but people were, like, doctors and institutions were paying grave robbers to steal the bodies so they could learn from the dead. It's now, even today, horrible and ghoulish and illegal. It was illegal back then, it's illegal now. And he brings the monster to life in 2 to 3 paragraphs. He runs away, the monster runs away, and he's like, yay, 2 years, ha! Then he, his best friend shows up, and his best friend's like, man, you look like poo. What has been happening to you? And he's like, because when I say loneliness is just dripping off of this book, I mean it. Loneliness is dripping off of this book. Every chapter, it's like, oh, I wish I had a friend. Oh, I miss my friends. Oh, my lovely friend, with him here, I feel better. Oh, all I want is a friend. Like Walton, going to the beginning, Walton, all he talks about how he wants a friend. And when he pulls Victor out of the ice as he's healing, he's like, oh, but he's wonderful, even though his eyes look mad sometimes, but I'm so lonely, he's my bestest friend. I'm like, oh boy, Walton. Shoot higher, bro. They're stuck in the ice because they're headed to the North Pole, and that's where Victor was in pursuit of the monster. Now he tells this whole story about what happened to him, what the monster has done, and second act is always my favorite because it's what the monster was doing those 2 years, right? Basically, in the beginning, he was frolicking in the woods, eating berries, drinking from streams. Very sweet, very innocent. And that was the point. He didn't start to get corrupted or vengeful until he started interacting with humans. He stalked a French family in the countryside, and he learned French from them. Yeah, very smart, not how typical media portrays him. He said, in the first movie when he drowned that girl, in the book, he saved that girl from drowning, and the father came up on them and shot the monster, and he's like, oh, this is what I get for doing a good deed. So it is, like I said, the adage of you treat someone like a monster, they'll become a monster. And again, this is like the first time in print that this was put to page. Could there have been folklores and myths that I'm not familiar with that showcase this? Of course. Usually myths tend to be like, hey, everyone stay in their lane or else. But, I'm not familiar with every myth, even though I want to be. But I'm not. So, and the monster basically convinces, and the monster does become vengeful and hateful, and he does do some horrible things. And while this is happening, Victor's younger brother is murdered. This girl, because in the beginning he just talks about his angelic childhood, where his family, he has 2 younger brothers, Ernest and William's the youngest. His family took in this beautiful little orphaned Elizabeth when she was a child, and basically groomed them both that they will be married to each other when they get older, even though they raised them as siblings. Yikes. It's always funny when I read older text and Gothic horrors or whatever, what's supposed to shock me doesn't. It's more about what they found normal, like basically grooming Elizabeth to marry Victor. And the book always like, oh, she loves him. So I'm like, yeah, but you're telling me Victor's telling Walter how much Elizabeth loves him. And I'm like, yeah, sure, bro. She didn't have a choice. Like, what do you mean? Anyway, so he comes home, his family's happy to see him, but upset because his youngest brother, William, was murdered. And the woman is charged with the crime. She is convicted, and Victor's convinced she didn't do it. It is interesting. I always find this part interesting, how guilty Elizabeth feels because she loaned him a piece of jewelry that was missing, and that seems to be the reason for the crime, and how guilty Elizabeth feels. And I can't help but feel like, or think that, is this a little bit of Mary Shelley's guilt from her life pulling through? Because, whether you mean to or not, authors usually tend to put, if it's a work from their heart, a little bit of themselves into it, right? So Victor encounters the monster. The monster tells him what's been going on for 2 years. He was kind, but the more he interacts with humans, the more vengeful and hateful he became. And he's like, make me a companion. Make me a woman. Make me the bride of Frankenstein. And Victor's like, yeah. And then he's like, nah, change my mind. And the monster's like, well, I'm going to make you sorry for that. So the monster goes on a revenge spree, which at any point I was like, Victor, are you gonna do something about this? Because it really does seem that like Victor just kind of lets this stuff happen. And again, I can't help but think that might have been what Mary Shelley was feeling at the time. And I'll talk about that in a second. The ending is not what you think. And I'm gonna leave it at that, because I think everyone should give this book a try. The language is kind of difficult to get through, especially if you're not used to reading older books, but I think it is worthwhile. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece for a reason. It changed the paradigm of horror for a reason. And Mary Shelley is an interesting person. Now, why do I think Elizabeth's guilt and Victor's non-action kind of, for me, might mirror what Mary Shelley was feeling? Well, Mary Shelley met her husband when she was 16, 17, and he was 21. They ran away together and became lovers, not married, because he was already married. And they basically traveled the world. Her would-be husband's lover at the time, and her stepsister, who was also sleeping with Mr. Shelley. So they traveled the world, and Mary Shelley gave birth to 4 children, but lost 3. So the guilt, right? The grief, the loneliness. And at one point, after giving birth to 2 of Mr. Shelley's children, his wife killed herself. And I wonder if that guilt is portrayed in Elizabeth in this book, you know? Because sure, Mary Shelley didn't do anything to Harriet physically, but it could not have been easy, you know, that situation. And then the fact that Harriet you could just feel the guilt off the page, and I wonder if it's a mirror for her life, right? And the grief, and Victor losing himself to the madness because of the grief that was happening, because all the death that was happening around him, and him feeling culpable for it. Like I said, she lost 3 children. I think the first one was sudden infant death, and I think the other 2 as well. I know a lot of people say it was miscarriages, but there are accounts that she actually gave birth to them, and they died later on than when she gave birth. So it sounds more like infant deaths than miscarriages. And I can't imagine that kind of pain. I can't imagine the guilt and the kind of pain that went through, and the longing for a friend in this book. So much of the carnage that wouldn't have happened if Victor created a friend for the monster. That's true. And Victor was slowly slipping into madness in the beginning, but then his best friend came, and his friendship helped him pull it out. Walter is so in need of a friend that he's happily sitting here and talking to this madman, you know, and later puts him in a weird position with the monster. So the loneliness, that's what got to me. Like, I had to put this book down a couple times and like go do something else. I thought I was prepared myself for the grief of it, and I think I did. It's just the loneliness of it I wasn't prepared for. And I can't help but wonder, is that what Mary really wanted? A true friend? You know? Because she was a mistress. And then later she got married, and only when Mr. Shelley's wife died and he wanted to get custody of the children, so he basically married her to look good in a custody battle with his estranged wife's family. So, and her stepsister that traveled all around with him was also Mr. Shelley's mistress, because she gave birth to his daughter, you know, so she was all alone. It very much feels like she was all alone, and she was all alone dealing with the death of her children. Like, I can't imagine, you know, especially since when she returned home after running away with Shelley the first time, her family shunned her. And I'm like, that sucks, but that's also kind of how society was at the time. And you very much knew that, Mary. So I can't imagine she was shocked by that. And any friends she would have at that point would have turned away, right? And her stepsister's not really her friend because it's her lover's mistress. So the want of a friend in this book is so heartbreaking, you know? It really is. And I can't help but like parallel it to her real life. As all good artists do, really, you know, they evoke emotions in you. But it, like I said, a masterpiece. Like, how can, like, by contemporary standards, it's slow, the pacing's weird, very flowery language. But you can't put contemporary standards on a book that was written like 200 years ago. It is a piece of history, and is a piece of literary history, because there's so many classic monsters or stories we wouldn't have had. And she is one of the very few women that got published at that time. So you have to take that into account too. So I definitely read it. So I think it's a book that everyone should at least give a try to. Just know it's the pacing you're used to, non-existent. Just not there. Where is she? She's not in the room with us, okay? But give it a try. But man, I would love, if you've read this book before, like, let me know. Did you think the loneliness was more prominent than the grief? Because for me, it felt that way. Maybe because the madness of the grief that Victor went through happened after he created the monster, not before. Maybe that's why. But yeah, let me know. Okay, I don't want to. It's time for me to get back to the real world. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. And happy spooky season. Bye.